You're up in the sky, I'll carry you home, home to the mountaineers. And soon, my friend, you'll see them again, the ones you left behind, the ones you left behind. And I'll sing for you all the way home.
Hi everybody, welcome to Sally Talk for a special Valentine's Day episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today is the day of love, and one thing that reminds us as human beings, as conscious beings, is that we love, and it's a mystery, and when you really think about it, it doesn't make any sense, but we love our families, we love our loved ones, and all over social media you're going to see posts of people loving their significant others, loving their pets, loving their children, and I just really felt it was important to love those who are grieving, because this is a difficult day for those who are grieving, especially those who aren't able to post that post. And we kind of it's a strange day because we still love our loved one, but we can't physically show it and express it. And so that's part of grief. Grief is loving and not being able to show it. So today I have a special guest, which I will introduce in a minute, and we're going to talk to all of those. We're going to talk in honor of all of those out there where Valentine's Day is a painful day. But we're also going to talk about how we've worked through our grief, and then we're going to talk too about how you can love again, and that love really is the answer. It's important. And also loving yourself. One of the people that you really should love the most, or that you should love, is that you should love yourself and show self-care and take care of yourself, because you're vital and you're important to this world, and your life is precious, and if you're still here, then you still have something to offer, and so you have to remember that. So on Valentine's Day, give yourself a hug as well. So before we go on, I'm going to do just a little shout out to my sponsor, which is me. I'm with Arbonne International. So for 40 years, Arbonne International has cared about your health, your skin, the animals, the environment, and we're proud that we just announced we are a certified B Corporation, which means we are transparent as to where all of our profits go to, and that not only do they go to support the individual businesses of the Arbonne consultants, but also it goes to the environment. We source a lot of our ingredients from sustainable places, and we care about our environment, and we partnered with TerraCycle so that we can recycle, and we want to be fully sustainable and not impose on the environment at all by 2030, which is really exciting. So if you want to know more about it, you can check me out on Facebook, Sally Hallida. I'm independent consultant with Arbonne International, or go to sallyhallida.arbonne.com. That's sallyhallida.arbonne.com. So on my grief journey, I lost my boyfriend, John, on February 16th, 2016. And it was 2 days after the very successful opening of his coffee shop. And it was one of those things where we really thought that once we got through the coffee shop, he'd be okay. And as it turned out, he wasn't. And he was loved, he was surrounded, he was heard, and yet he still chose to end his life. And it was a horrible shock to all of us, and it still remains that way. So when I come into Valentine's Day and heading toward the anniversary of his death, which is the 16th, after 4 years, it's still is like a dark storm that kind of looms in the front, and you're not exactly sure how it's going to play out, and you kind of want it to pass, but it doesn't, so you have to kind of weather it through. So what happened during this time was, as I started this podcast, and if you want to know the entire story, I have an episode earlier on that you can scroll to the second and third episode if you want to know the entire story. But today I want to focus on my guest. Through Instagram, which is strange, but Instagram has turned out to be a kinder, more gentler form of social media. And through Instagram, I found support through other people who were also suicide loss survivors. And Lisa and I will talk a little bit about how we met too. But I got to know Lisa, who's all the way over in Florida. But as a strange and sad, ironic coincidence, she lost her boyfriend literally the day before I lost John, which was so odd if you think about it, because she was literally grieving a day before I started. So our journey, and it was our boyfriends. There's so many similarities. So it's just been really comforting to have her out there, and we've been communicating back and forth. So I wanted her to be on my podcast because she really inspires me. A lot of you have seen that I've been painting, and she actually inspired me to do that, because I would have never painted in a million years if she hadn't said, show your, this way of getting through grief is actually through that. I would have never ever thought of that. So I wanted to say, so what she has a wonderful Instagram account called Southern Grace by Design. And so what she wants to do to use that Instagram page was to connect and share with others for, support and healing through other survivors, and, various forms of expression like that, like, art, writing, art, music, songwriting, which she's doing now, which she sends me her songs, which is great. And it's all about, resilience, courage, and the constant perseverance, to overcome the pains of grief and the symptoms of PTSD. That's another thing she and I have in common, was that we both found our boyfriends. So that's a whole nother level. It's PTSD, which you have to address. There's specific therapists that specifically work with that, because it's completely different. And I'm not saying it's necessarily more painful. It's different. It's just different. Because people who weren't there kind of have they feel like they should have been there. So it's different, it's just all encompassing. But anyway, she wants to turn all of those symptoms into something that's healing and healthy, and for herself and for her daughter. And so she's hoping that eventually people will find hope and new ways to cope with their own grief and struggles with mental health after suicide loss, and to stop suicide and the stigma and devastation that it leaves behind, because that is the thing. And we're going to talk about that too, about the stigma that's still there. And also too, we want to reach out to, if there's one person out there who thinks that their life and their loved ones' lives would be better off without them, it's not true. And you have to find as much help as you can, because if you think that, you need help, because it's not true. So Lisa, thank you so much for being on. I know it isn't easy for you. It's not easy for me, but when the Valentine's Day came up, I thought, you know what, this is our episode. And I just thought it'd be a perfect episode, because there's people out there that this is not an easy day for them.
Well, thank you, Sally, for having me on. Definitely. This is definitely, not an easy conversation for me to have. But I think that it's a very powerful conversation that needs to take place. And I feel like it's my responsibility to kind of get that message out there to help spread around, awareness about suicide and the stigma, devastation that leaves behind. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my story and kind of, what happened that day. I think that's really important. It's a hard one to talk about. You know, first of all, I kind of want to just describe what I feel like grief has felt like for me over the last 3 years. Um, so I wrote this down so I remember. Grief comes in like the waves of the ocean. Sometimes they are huge waves with a strong undertow that can carry you out, and it can feel a lot like drowning. Other times it can feel smaller, and it just simply crashes in on your back, but you're still left standing. Grief just is just like that, just like the waves of the ocean. You never know when it's going to happen, how it's going to come in. It's a really difficult thing. Um, so I'm going to share my story with you today because it's a hard one. It being Valentine's Day, tomorrow is going to be the 4th-year anniversary since he took his own life, February 15th, 2016. My youngest daughter and I found my fiance at our family home in the backyard. My daughter's father, his name was Wesley, and he took his life only 2 days before her 2nd birthday. Early on, I felt like he had led me there to find him. So I felt a lot of anger, and anger has been something that I've definitely had to deal with over the years. Today, I'm not so certain that that's even true. This is how grief works. We always try to find, the answers as to why somebody does what they do, and, looking backwards and so forth. The memory of that day has been imprinted on my mind and my heart. And it probably will be, forever. I have since been diagnosed with PTSD. So I think, mental health awareness is also an important conversation as well. When we found him, I had our daughter in my arms. I had to shield her so that she wouldn't see him. But I could not shield her ears to stop her from hearing the sounds of me screaming. I was very scared. I couldn't stop her from feeling the pounding of my heart as I'm holding her against my chest. So she's very scared. I called 911, and I could hear the police sirens coming, and stayed on the phone with the 911 officer or operator, and she told me to stay on the phone with her and to walk out front. Keep in mind, I had my daughter in my arms, and she told me to hold my hands up in the air so that the officers could see what was in my hands. And of course, I had my daughter. I had a phone in one hand and my daughter in the other arm. When I walked out to the front, I had guns drawn on me and her. I felt like a SWAT team. There were red and blue lights everywhere, cops everywhere. By that point, our neighbors, our friends, were all outside, wondering what's going on. I was scared, very, very frightened. So not only do I have the memory of finding his lifeless body in our backyard, I've got that to deal with as well. I remember an officer coming up to approach me with a gun pointed at me. And then he would let that gun down, and he would take my phone away and lead me on over to a different area in the yard. I don't know how long it was, but maybe an hour or so later, you feel like you're in a fog. I'll just put it that way. And I remember asking the officer, when was the ambulance going to come? As if he was still alive. Now, he had not really died. And the officer just looked at me and said that there wouldn't be an ambulance to come. It was just a really very traumatic trip that will never leave my mind, my heart. I would end up developing PTSD. It started out with things like um, anxiety, my heart racing so much it would feel like what I would describe as an elephant sitting on my chest. I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't drive, not long distances. Just a lot of different things that would come up. Um, so looking back, I felt like on that day as well, I felt like possibly if I had just gotten there just a little bit sooner, that maybe I could have saved him. So this is just another thing that happens with suicide. I tried to calculate exactly the minute the last time that I heard from him and when I arrived exactly, and I would end up calculating it was anywhere from just a minute to 15 minutes, and if I'd have been there any sooner, I'd have saved his life. What I'd have to reckon with after much therapy and help and over time was that it's not my fault. I deal with guilt. It's a really hard thing to deal with. I faced a lot of stigma. I knew Wesley pretty much all my life. We went to school together. We went to elementary school all the way through high school. We had some of the same friends, and he was just this happy guy. Always was a smile on his face, and he would just help anybody. He was brilliant. He was a very, very smart man. But he dealt with some things himself, seemingly with mental illness as well, that maybe was untreated, that I didn't recognize at the time. Nobody on the outside could make sense of it. So everybody has to have a reason why something like this can happen. And so I kind of felt like I was the reason that they would come up with. And I felt abandoned, and obviously, by him. And I felt abandoned by family, community, friends. My story is quite different than what yours was. I didn't have anybody showing up and calling or there to help me through that process. And so suicide definitely, it's just a different type of experience, when you're dealing with loss and grief. And so one of the things that I wanted to point out and mention was when you have a friend or family member that is going through something like that, loss after a suicide, it is very important to help provide support, early on in the grieving process. And from my perspective, I would just say that there's nothing that you can say wrong ever. Just acknowledging that you care about somebody, even acknowledging, their death it's most important just to say something. Just say something to them. The worst thing that you can ever do is to just say nothing at all, because you may not realize it, but there may be everybody else just might not be saying anything either, because it's a difficult subject to talk about. It's a different kind of grief process and different kind of loss.
We talked about this before when we were starting about, one of the things I like to recommend to people is if they want to know what to do is treat it like any other illness. If somebody dies from cancer or they die from illness or tragedy, in a car accident, whatever you would do in that circumstance is the same as what you would do with someone who lost somebody by suicide. You don't have to overthink this, And I think you're absolutely right, is that if you're not saying anything, everybody else might not be saying anything either. And you can tell, I hate to say, it wasn't like I kept count, but even though I had support, I knew the people that did not reach out, or the people that stopped, that maybe reached out initially and then stopped. I mean, I know who they are. Yeah.
You get notice of it, and
Mm-hmm.
because you're desperately wanting somebody just to reach out to you, and it. Um, so I think like all that process that we go through, with grieving and the blame, especially with suicide, the self blaming, the guilt that we put on ourselves. What if I would have done something differently that day? Is everybody blaming me? Well, it just creates this whole paranoia, kind of feeling, and you don't know what is real anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and it's shocking to me actually, um, how people respond or just don't respond at all, and just how we as a society and a community don't stick together to support um, the families that are grieving from suicide loss. It's just a difficult subject to talk about, and um, it's a scary one because I think I felt like I was going to be judged. I didn't know how to answer the question. Sometimes when people would ask, well, how did he die? And I just didn't even know how to answer the question. Well, I wanted to be honest, but then I also felt like I made other people feel uncomfortable if I
Mm-hmm.
was honest, answering that question.
Yeah.
Stigma is huge with suicide and, mental illness. I deal with PTSD, and, at first that was kind of even a difficult thing to, even say to myself, but it's just the truth,
Mm-hmm. When
yeah.
you said about the crime scene,
Hmm.
that's what people, I think, don't realize is that it's a crime scene. It's a crime scene right out of the gate. When the cops come, even in my situation, it was a crime scene. And I kind of sat there and I kind of knew, I felt like I was in a different, I almost felt like I was looking at myself answering the questions.
Yeah.
I felt out of body, but I kind of knew they were going to ask me about it. And they wanted, they were asking me specific questions and things like that, and that is definitely PTSD too, because you're right. And I just put this together because you do have this paranoia that you could have done something, and so the crime scene feeds into that,
Yeah.
that they treat it into crime scene because you think you've done something wrong. And then if people don't call you or don't check up on you, then they think that you had something. So it just feeds into that,
Right.
the paranoia that you could have done something.
Yeah. Yeah. And, social media is another thing too to kind of throw into that mix as well. When someone's grieving, Facebook became a real, kind of a difficult space for me to be in,
Mm-hmm.
because I just, obviously, with Facebook, we have a lot of our old high school friends, people that we grew up with on there. And I guess I just always kind of felt like, oh gosh, well, they're looking at me and, like blaming me or something like that. And I'm sure that's just not even the case. But regardless, that's the feeling that's kind of left behind. And so Instagram, has kind of been a different experience for me. And so I've used that as a way just to, as a way to express myself, kind of start, breaking those chains that are binding me, I suppose, with grief and stigma. Um, some of the ways that I've healed or been healing through the process is art. Art has been huge. And that's something I didn't know about myself. I didn't know that I was an artist. I didn't know that I was really as creative as I am. I've always been a writer. I write all the time. I mean, it's just, like the air that I breathe, that I have to write every day. So whether I'm journaling or I've been writing a book, so um, getting further along in that. And then I've decided to take some of my writing and try to put it into music now. This is kind of a funny thing, but it's a new thing for me because I'm not a musician, but I'm enjoying it. And so those are ways that I've found to cope and kind of help get me through the process. And all those nights that I can't sleep at all because I'm feeling that elephant on my chest, well, I'm painting or I'm writing, and we're trying to play music, practicing my guitar. You know, those are ways that I found, and I think it's important to share that, to maybe offer hope to other people that we don't have to stay stuck in our grief in that space, that we can help our own selves, even if there is nobody else around, there, or anybody wants to listen to you, gosh, just go try something new. Be creative. I think there's something really healing about the creative process for us in any form, any kind of art form. So I just wanted to share that as well, because my experience has been very, very traumatic, and it's been 4 years, 4 years, and people will look at me, and they just kind of think, gosh, why are you still talking about it? Or like I had an aunt who had mentioned something to me one time. You just need to get over this. Well, you just don't ever get over it. It just doesn't work that way. And it's perfectly healthy to remember somebody that you loved. And I don't care if it's 10, 20 years down the road. And if I want to, if I have a memory or something and it brings tears to my eyes, there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's perfectly normal to want to share stories or have memories. It's just part of grieving. Grief never ends. I just don't believe that it will ever end. It'll change in its form, and its impact, I suppose, in our daily lives. So, as I said, I've used art and in different forms of expression to help me through those times.
Yeah, no, and you've been really inspiring too. That was why, I tagged you when I painted my first painting, because it was like, it was like, and it was a tree. It wasn't anything, but you understand though. Now I get it. You get why people create, because they work through things. I'm on Audible, and I just listened to James Taylor did a 1 hour his first 21 years where he talks and he tells his first 21 years, and nobody really realizes how traumatic his childhood was, how he was in a asylum for a while. There was severe addiction issues in their family. And he would say when the Fire and Rain was the suicide of a friend of his, and his friends told him after he recorded his album at Apple Music with the Beatles, because they didn't want to tell him before that she had taken her life, and that's why when he says, just yesterday morning, they let me know you were gone. And he said, when I heard about her death, he goes, so I did what I always do. I wrote a song. Mm-hmm. And it was, this whole thing has been so eye-opening. I don't know why it wasn't. I mean, I kind of knew I guess I knew on an intellectual level that people did that, but I'd never really understood it from from the emotional level of how.
It's healing. There's just something about being able to express your feelings. And sometimes you're not even completely aware of exactly what you're feeling, but it's just not feeling good. Or maybe it is feeling good. You're having a memory. Sometimes when I begin to write or art or like in songwriting, I'm not quite sure what it is going to be about, and it just starts flowing. It just comes out in one way or another, and it's just healing. You learn more. I've had time to more time for self-reflection through those various forms of expressing myself. So it's good.
Yeah, it is. It is. And now I appreciate it when I hear songs like Fire and Rain, or I hear these songs now, and now I know where it all came from, and then it makes it even more powerful. I think, it's really important that you figure out what ways that you can do it. And also when you were talking about the time frame of the grief process, I think that's one thing that we've been kind of taught through society, that it's supposed to be short. In Star is Born, in the last one with Lady Gaga, I don't know if you saw it.
I did.
But, yeah. And so a friend of mine, when we got to the end, because the way he takes his life was the same way as John did, and she grabbed my arm, like she didn't realize. And I had said to her when we went in, I say, I know how this ends, so don't worry about me. I mean, it's okay to worry about me, but I'm just saying, like, I'm not going to be surprised. And so it was all very well done, but it's always the same way. It's at the very end, and he takes his life. She's on a couch. And then the next scene, she's wandering around her house. She's on the couch. And then the next scene, she's in a beautiful dress and she's singing a song. And it's a beautiful song. But we've been kind of trained that it's like you sleep on the couch for a little bit And then you get dressed up and you go sing a song. And it's kind of like
that. Yeah.
the time frame between the death and the getting in the dress and singing the song could be 10 years. It could be, 3 years. I don't know what it is, but all I know is
for everybody.
Yeah.
For everyone.
And you're taking everything that you as a person, it's literally testing everything you believe as a human, your faith, it's just taking everything and throwing it in and testing it. And so it's wherever you are in your life, that's what it's, that's where you're going to be. And so I think we've been trained in society that you're supposed to get over it. I think because we've just seen it, because they want to show a happy ending. They want to show that she could stand up and she could still struggle through. But like we've talked about people who are contemplating suicide, you don't want to give them the idea that we'll be okay. I mean, we are okay, but it leaves a huge hole that's going to be forever. The hole's going to be there forever.
Right, exactly. It's just, if I could say anything, it would be the impact of losing him, the hurt, the pain, just the loss of him in itself is tremendous, tremendous. But what would also follow be such devastation to us financially. The amount of moves that me and my daughter have had to make. The power of being able to grieve early on and having that support system, the difference, those kinds of things, could have made. We're never going to be better off without you. If he would have known the path our lives would end up taking, the amount of pain that we have gone through, I feel if he could have related with that, it would have made all the difference in the world.
Well, and also you suffered a lot of loss after his loss. You lost family members, and he could, and his not being there made it harder.
Exactly. So speaking of which, I lost my sister-in-law just a few months after he had passed away. So this would be his brother's wife. We had 2 little girls. They were about 6 months apart in age. They attended the same preschool at the time, and they had to do like a little dance recital at the church. And it was my sister-in-law that was trying to, help us all work together. And we would end up in church, this evening to watch our daughters dance and everything. So everybody's together, and she hadn't been feeling so well. But we had a good night at the church, and he goes home. She never wakes up the next morning. And so my brother-in-law also lost his wife, Dan, and his brother in a very short amount of time. Grief is, oh my gosh, it's been tremendous. All in all, I think in a little over a year's time, I lost 6 family members, immediate family members.
I think that
people don't even realize that. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of grief.
And you're still, which is so admirable that you're still, you're still pushing forward and working through it. But the thing is that if things would be and I know Wesley would have wanted to be there with you through that,
Absolutely.
I mean, John was the same way. John would have wanted to be there with me. Like when my father died in 2018, like he would have been a support for me, through that. And I'm not talking from the selfish aspect. I mean, he was that person that liked to be there for people. And so thinking we're better off without you we're not, because you've come into our lives and now we know, how you are, and then without, and we can't constantly comment and post every single time we miss their presence.
Right.
It happens constantly. Yeah.
And, believing, I mean, it's just a false belief, and it just kind of goes back to mental illness, and I can't, he was never diagnosed with anything prior to. But looking back, I see a lot of signs and of things that I should have recognized. But um, our mental health is extremely important. And there's nothing wrong with taking care of ourselves. As somebody once told me, to best love everybody around me that I love, I had to love myself first, to care for myself first. And I think that's one of the big lessons that I've learned, that it is not selfish to care for yourself and your needs. I better love my children and everybody else, because I do.
Well, I think that's the golden rule. Love others as you love yourself. It's funny if you look at it from the standpoint of, if you love them more than you love yourself, that's not good. If you love yourself more than you love others, that's not good.
Right.
You have to love others as if as you love yourself. So as you go through the journey of your existence here on earth, you have to figure out how to love yourself and love others. But you can't, right. You're not going to be able to really love others unless you love yourself. So it's a constant. It's interesting how, and that's why I thought Valentine's Day was so important, because it's this day of love and chocolate, and right. I think it's important to really understand how really huge it's been played so much. Love is all you need. It was all over the Beatles, all that, which was, of course, John's favorite band. But, it's all over. So we kind of take it for granted. We don't really think about it as much as we should, of its impact and how powerful it is, and how we have to learn how to love our enemies. We have to learn how to love, it's really remarkable that you love my dog. Like, I love my dog. My dog was there for me, So it's I think it's just really important that you have to, but the first place that you have to look is how much you love yourself. And John wasn't a big fan of himself, and I look back on that and I realized that there was some self-love issues, that right. he had. And
exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I definitely think he loved other people more than he loved himself.
The self-talk, the inner self-talk, and those are some things that I knew about him that other people didn't necessarily know. So yes, our self-talk is so very important. Yeah, self-worth.
Yeah, we talked about that before, about how a lot of the people that were shocked at their taking their lives, they didn't know them that well. As a painful thing to find out that there's somebody that you thought you were close to, and then you found out that you didn't understand about the demons and the inner struggles and all that other stuff, and that's because you just weren't that close. And that's the painful thing.
It's a hard thing, to say or to acknowledge, but that's just the reality. The truth is that, here's the thing. Obviously, the immediate family, his son, his mother, father, brothers, cousins, family, friends, everybody's greatly affected, but not just them. Every person that Wesley came in contact with in life, they are affected by his suicide. And they all want answers. Well, why could he have done something like that? What happened? Mm-hmm. It's hard for people to deal with. Yeah.
It is. They're all affected. And everybody wants to know. I remember one person posted on Facebook, and they meant well. And, a lot of people post these posts, but they say things like, I heard that, someone I cared very much about, took his life. And I want everybody out there to know I'm here for you. Don't feel like you're alone. Those posts. And they're fine. And I don't want people to not post those things. But it's painful for the person that was directly involved, because it's almost saying like you weren't there. And I was there.
Right. I remember being very, very nervous. And I can't remember exactly what I did, but I just remember being hesitant about posting or sharing anything, about him. I think I tried to do some videos sometimes, around the anniversary time or his birthday or Father's Day, things like that. But just scared to share in that way about him early on. But then I would sometimes see other people making posts about about him and his death. And I just sometimes would just wait a minute. Yeah. But so you have to realize that everybody has a right to grieve,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all going through something.
And they haven't been what we've been through.
That's
You
correct.
know,
Correct. They
God
don't know.
bless
They don't
them.
know the whole story.
Right, but also too, they haven't been through what we've been through in the sense of they're not going to ever really understand unless they've been through what we've been through, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Yes.
So sometimes when I would get that way, I'd get into this place where I had to find the compassion because I wouldn't want them to know what I know anyway. So what, do you want them to know what you know? You don't. That
Not
means that
really.
they would have had to find somebody. It's like, no. So let them be, God bless them, because they're separated from this, and that's good, that they're not as directly involved, because I wouldn't want to wish it on anybody, but I think it's a and we've talked about this before, but I think that's one of the hardest parts about the grief from suicide, is that if you get better, you don't want them to be right. And I've said this before. You don't want them to be right because for some strange reason they thought it's not a selfish act. It was almost selfless, because they think that the world would be better off without them, and they're wrong. And so you don't want to be better off without them. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to get over it,
Yes,
And then
I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, when you say it out loud, it sounds crazy, but that's it. You don't want it. You don't want to. If somebody died from cancer, they say to you, "Give your life. Live your life. I'll be right with you," and all that other stuff. But you didn't get that send off. The stigma's attached, and then also you don't want them to be right, that the world was better off.
That's correct. You just don't know which direction to go in. That's why I just think it's so important to have these kinds of conversations, and just put it out there. In whatever ways that we feel safe enough to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important because it brings about more awareness. I mean, and hopefully, like telling your story. I hate to try to tell my story like that because I don't want anybody to hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I don't want anybody to feel hurt, but it's an important story to share because I think it could help save a life. It's just the article that I had sent you that I wrote about the 13 reasons why.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's been a while. But I think just knowing the details of that day from our perspective might really get somebody to think a little bit longer and pause, to take a deep breath before they take their own life. And then, the other side of that is, once that something like that happens, the grieving process for somebody, a survivor of suicide loss is completely, I wouldn't say completely different, it's just very different. It's a different process that we're going through. And to understand that, bring out awareness about that, about stigma. I think as a society in our communities, we need to be more generous with just loving and providing support with other people. But I think we need to all do a better job. Mm-hmm. As far as with suicide loss.
I think, and also remember that when things happen in publicity, or in the public eye, that it affects all of us. Even Kobe Bryant, even though it was an accident, it still affects everyone who's grieving. I have a good friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, who lost her daughter to an accident, and she just recently in December, and I texted her after the Kobe thing happened, and I just told her I know it was going to put her back to day one, and I wanted to tell her I understood, and I was there for her, and she was like, she wrote me back and she said, "I thought I was going crazy, so this is normal?" And I went, "Yes, it's very normal."
Very normal.
Yeah, you think like, oh, I'm making it about myself. Like when Anthony Bourdain died, it was like, you're like, oh my gosh, it brings you back to day one. And then you're like, I'm not making it about myself, but it does. That's exactly what happens. It brings you right back to it. And all of the comments and the people that say things, and It all brings you right back to it. It's just, there's no, it's just what it is. And so that's a good way to reach out to somebody, is somebody that's been through something similar. Just say they're going through a rough day. This is going to be hard for you today.
Thinking about you, just something, just reach out, do anything. And from my perspective, I mean, obviously there are some things that would probably be the wrong thing to say, maybe, but from my perspective, just say anything, do something, some kind of gesture, let them know that you're thinking of them, and that in itself is support.
And talk about them. I throw with people sometimes because I'll say, "Oh, that's John's favorite song," and everyone gets quiet. But I'm like, I'm going to talk about him.
That's normal. That's healthy. And it's like some people feel like you're not supposed to, and I say no. The more memories you share, and sharing those stories together, those are things that I didn't really get to do early on in the grieving process. I do more so now. Sometimes I'll hear from people, and so it's helpful. Just remember just to say something, do something, anything.
Well, I really admire, we're already at an hour. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. I knew it was going to be fine. I think that, that's why I wanted to, what was I going to say? Oh, the end of Hamilton. I love Hamilton, the musical. And there's a song at the end. It's "Who lives, who dies, who tells your story." And that's the thing. You don't want people to forget about them. Their life, they cut their life short, but there are things that I felt were important to John that I could continue on. I feel, in a way. And I think I really admire the fact that, I lost some friends, and I had some people that didn't show up for me, but I did have people that showed up for me. I don't know. That would have been so painful for me to have to go through that, where like if his family turned on me or all of that. His ex-wife was amazing, which I was happy that we didn't have a lot of drama, for his children, because we were able to do it. And I like her, so it wasn't hard, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know what that was like. And I really admire you for like persevering and finding your strength and figuring out how to walk through it, and then to turn around and share it with other people and try to inspire other people. It's really, that's amazing. I mean, taking care of yourself is really all we have to do. And for you to turn around and want to inspire other people, which you do on your Instagram, it's really beautiful.
Well, thank you very much, Sally. It's difficult for sure, and it's baby steps for me right now still, but it's also healing for me to do that.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, I can see it. Because when we first talked, from now, I think both of us are doing better, and being able to manage it. And I'm really glad that I have you to reach out to, because was amazing when you and I first started talking, and that we were literally a day off. Yeah. That you were in hell for one day before I was in hell. And that was a thing too, when I got when my son came to pick me up, and I got in the car and we drove away. I remember looking out at all the people that were walking their dogs, and that just had no idea what I had just been through. And the fact that I was in my car and you in Florida, well, you weren't in Florida at the time, but I'm just saying, like, you were in a whole nother place in the whole other country. And you were one day ahead of me in this journey. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of us out there. And so I want, if anybody wants to reach out, and contact us and find us on, my Instagram is Sally Talk. I think there's a hyphen because somebody else is called Sally Talk. So I'm a hyphen. And yours is Southern Grace by Design. And I love your artwork, and I love your daughter's adorable, and I love all the stuff you share. So keep it up. And I think we're going to end on this, because I think it was really great. And I know this is painful, so I really appreciate your sharing this. I think you really, it's very obvious you're coming from your heart. And I think it really helps people to hear it when you talk, and keep writing too.
So, thank you so much.
All right. Okay. So I'll be talking to you soon. Thanks so much for being on. And that's it. I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks so much for joining us today. I know it's Valentine's Day and I know it's a happy day, but I want everyone to remember and reach out and send a couple hearts, even if it's via text, to those who may be having a rough day today, because they're out there. So thanks so much, and we will talk again soon.
You're up in the sky, I'll carry you home, home to the mountaineers. And soon, my friend, you'll see them again, the ones you left behind, the ones you left behind. And I'll sing for you all the way home. But why does it feel like home isn't home? I've been in this war too long. It's in the air that I breathe, oh, it's in the trees. It shivers down my spine. It shivers down my spine. I just sing my song as I walk through the gate. And there she stands just like before, but she doesn't look the same. The fear in her eyes, I've seen it before, and she can't recall my name. No, she can't recall my name. And so I sing to her as I fall